r/AITA I ruined my sister's gender reveal after she told me to get over trauma. The pink confetti cannon exploded in my hands 3 seconds too early, sending a cloud of rose-colored powder directly into my sister's face instead of gracefully arcing over the crowd of 53 carefully arranged guests. What the hell, Maya? Stephanie shrieked, clawing pink dust from her eyes while her perfectly curled blonde hair turned into cotton candy. The professional photographer, who she'd paid $800 for this moment, kept clicking away, capturing every second of what was supposed to be her magical gender reveal but was rapidly becoming a disaster. I should have felt guilty. I should have apologized and helped clean her up. Instead, I stood there holding the empty cannon, watching the chaos unfold with a strange sense of satisfaction that scared me almost as much as it thrilled me. I'm so sorry, I said, my voice flat and unconvincing. I guess I got excited. The crowd of family and friends shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to laugh or help. Aunt Patricia started forward with napkins while Stephanie's mother-in-law tried to salvage the Instagram-worthy backdrop of pink and blue balloons that was now dusted in premature celebration. You did this on purpose, Stephanie hissed, grabbing my wrist hard enough to bruise. Her manicured nails, painted in neutral tones so they'd photograph well, dug into my skin. You couldn't stand that today was about me, could you? 6 months ago, I would have crumbled at the accusation. 6 months ago, I would have bent over backwards to fix this. But 6 months ago, I was planning my own gender reveal party that would never happen. 6 months ago, I was 16 weeks pregnant and glowing, picking out nursery colors and debating between Emma and Oliver for baby names. 6 months ago, before the bleeding started during my lunch break at work. Before the emergency room. Before the ultrasound screen went silent. Maybe you should get over it, I said, throwing her own words back at her. The words she'd said to me just 3 days earlier when I tried to explain why organizing her gender reveal party was like swallowing glass. Stop being so dramatic, Steph. It's just powder. Her eyes widened. Around us, the conversation had died completely. Even the kids had stopped running around the backyard, sensing the tension crackling between us like electricity before a storm. Ladies. Uncle Mike called out with forced cheer, holding up his beer. How about we? No, Stephanie cut him off, her voice shaking with rage. Pink powder still clung to her eyelashes, making her look like she'd been caught in a fairy tale explosion. No, I want everyone to hear this. I want everyone to know what kind of person my sister really is. My heart hammered against my ribs. Part of me wanted to run, to escape before this got worse. But a bigger part, the part that had been screaming into the void for 6 months while everyone expected me to smile and move on, wanted to stay and fight. Because I was tired of pretending. Tired of being the understanding sister who helped plan baby showers and gender reveals while my own dreams decomposed in a medical waste bin. Tired of being told that my grief had an expiration date. Go ahead, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. Tell them. The photographer's camera clicked one more time, capturing the moment before everything fell apart. Stephanie's chest rose and fell rapidly, her wedding ring catching the afternoon sunlight as she gestured wildly at the mess around us. Maya has been jealous of my pregnancy from day one, she announced to our captive audience of family and friends. She can't handle that I'm happy, so she has to ruin everything. Steph, maybe we should, Mom started, stepping forward with that familiar peacekeeper expression I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. No, Mom. I'm done protecting her feelings. Stephanie's voice carried across the backyard, reaching the neighbors who were probably watching from their windows by now. She's been using what happened to her as an excuse to be selfish for months. It's pathetic. The words hit like a physical blow. I felt the color drain from my face as murmurs rippled through the crowd. My cousin Jessica looked horrified. Stephanie's college friends exchanged confused glances. They didn't know about the miscarriage, and now they were finding out like this, in the worst possible way. What happened to Maya? I heard someone whisper. She lost a baby back in March, Aunt Patricia murmured back. 16 weeks. More whispers. More stares. I wanted to disappear into the ground. See? Stephanie laughed bitterly, gesturing at me like I was evidence in a trial. She can't even handle people knowing. Everything has to be about her trauma, her loss, her pain. Well, guess what, Maya? Bad things happen to everyone. You don't get to hold the rest of us hostage because you're sad. That's when something inside me snapped completely. Hostage? My voice came out louder than I intended. When have I ever asked to be the center of attention? When have I ever made your pregnancy about me? Are you serious right now? Stephanie threw her hands up, sending another puff of pink powder into the air. You cried during my baby shower announcement. You couldn't even help me pick out nursery furniture without having a breakdown. And last week when I asked you to help with party planning, you gave me that whole sob story about how hard it was. Because it is hard. The words exploded out of me. It's hard to celebrate babies when mine is dead. It's hard to plan gender reveals when I'll never get one. It's hard to watch you complain about morning sickness and swollen feet when I would give anything, to feel sick and uncomfortable and huge and miserable if it meant my baby was alive. The backyard fell silent except for the sound of Mrs. Henderson's wind chimes tinkling in the breeze. Someone's phone buzzed with a notification, unnaturally loud in the quiet. Stephanie's expression shifted, and for a moment I thought I saw something like regret flicker across her face. But then her jaw hardened again. I'm pregnant, Maya. This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life, and you're making it about death. Do you know how that feels? Do you know what it's like to be afraid to be excited about my own baby because you might have another meltdown? Then why did you ask me to help plan this? I shot back. If I'm such a burden, why didn't you ask literally anyone else to organize your perfect Instagram moment? She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in our entire argument, Stephanie didn't have an immediate comeback. That's when Dad stepped forward, his face grave. Girls, that's enough. Maya, I think you should go home. The dismissal felt like a slap. Are you serious? You ruined your sister's party, he said quietly. On purpose. That's not grief, honey. That's cruelty. The word cruelty hung in the air like a death sentence. I stared at my father, the man who'd held me while I sobbed in the hospital parking lot, who'd helped me plant forget-me-nots in the garden for the baby I'd never hold, and felt something fundamental shift between us. Cruelty? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Dad, she told me 3 days ago that I needed to get over losing your grandchild. She said I was being dramatic. Those were her exact words. That's not, Stephanie started, but I cut her off. Yes, it is. You said, and I quote, Maya, you need to stop wallowing. People lose pregnancies all the time. At least now you know you can get pregnant. Remember that? When I was trying to explain why organizing your gender reveal was too painful? Mom's face went white. Stephanie, you didn't say that. I was trying to help her see the positive side, Stephanie said defensively, but her voice had lost some of its earlier conviction. She's been stuck in this depression spiral for months. Someone needed to give her tough love. Tough love? Uncle Mike's wife Sarah stepped forward, her expression incredulous. Stephanie, she lost a baby at 4 months. That's not something you just get over. Thank you, I said, feeling tears prick my eyes for the first time today. Thank you for saying that. But Stephanie wasn't backing down. Of course it's sad. I never said it wasn't sad. But she can't use it as an excuse to ruin my life forever. This party cost us $2,000. 2,000, Maya. The photographer, the decorations, the catering, all of it ruined because you wanted to throw a tantrum. A tantrum? The words came out strangled. You think this is a tantrum? What else would you call it? She gestured at the pink powder covering everything, at the confused guests, at the photographer who was now awkwardly packing up his equipment. You sabotaged my party because I hurt your feelings. That's literally what toddlers do. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You want to know what I call it, Steph? I call it 6 months of you expecting me to smile and nod and pretend everything's fine. 6 months of you complaining to me about how tired you are, how your back hurts, how pregnancy is so hard, while I'm still getting bills from the hospital where I delivered my dead baby. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone, I think it was Stephanie's friend Melissa, made a small, wounded sound. Maya, Mom said urgently, stepping toward me. Honey, maybe we should. No, I'm not done. I looked directly at Stephanie, who had gone very still. You want to know about the bills, Steph? They're $4,063. For an ambulance ride, an emergency ultrasound, and a D&E procedure to remove my dead baby. Insurance covered most of it, but I still owe $812. I get reminder notices every month. Every month, I get a bill that says pregnancy termination services, and I have to relive the worst day of my life. The backyard was so quiet I could hear traffic from the street. But sure, I continued, my voice getting stronger. Tell me more about how your $2,000 party is ruined. Tell me more about how I need to get over it. Stephanie's face had gone completely pale under the pink powder. For the first time since the confetti cannon exploded, she looked genuinely shaken. Maya, I didn't know about the bills, she said quietly. Because you never asked. You never ask about anything except whether I'm over it yet. I'm asking now, Stephanie said, but her voice sounded hollow, like she was reciting lines from a script she'd never read before. Are you? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because 3 days ago when I tried to tell you why this party was hard for me, you cut me off after 30 seconds. You said you didn't have time for my emotional baggage because you had vendor calls to make. I was stressed about the planning. You're always stressed about something, Steph. Your wedding, your house renovation, your promotion, your pregnancy announcements. There's always something more important than whatever I'm going through. Uncle Mike cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should give you two some space to work this out. No, I said firmly. Everyone can stay. I want witnesses this time, because apparently when it's just me and Stephanie, my version of events gets rewritten. Dad stepped closer, his expression warning. Maya Catherine, watch your tone. My tone? I spun toward him, feeling reckless now, like I was driving toward a cliff with my foot on the accelerator. Dad, what tone should I use when talking about how my sister told me that losing Emma was just practice for getting pregnant again? Emma? Mom's voice broke on the name. You named the baby? The admission hung in the air like smoke. I hadn't meant to say it. For 6 months, I'd kept that detail locked away, too private and precious to share with anyone except David. But now it was out there, my daughter's name floating among the pink powder and shocked faces. Oh God, Aunt Patricia whispered, pressing her hand to her mouth. Stephanie took a step back, and for the first time today, she looked genuinely horrified. Maya, I never said it was practice. I said. You said at least now I knew my body could do it. Like Emma was just a trial run for a real baby later. That's not what I meant. But it's what you said. I looked around at the faces staring back at me, family members who'd sent sympathy cards and casseroles 6 months ago but hadn't mentioned Emma since. David's mom, who'd stopped asking how I was doing by month 3. Stephanie's friends, who were hearing about my miscarriage for the first time and looking like they wanted to crawl under the dessert table. Here's what none of you understand, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Emma wasn't just a pregnancy I lost. She was my daughter. I felt her kick. I talked to her every night. I bought her a teddy bear that still sits in what was going to be her nursery. David and I picked out her middle name, Rose, after Mom's mom, the day before I started bleeding. Mom made a sound like she'd been punched. And when I delivered her at 16 weeks, she was perfect. Tiny, but perfect. She had David's nose and 10 fingers and 10 toes, and she looked like she was sleeping. The nurses wrapped her in a pink blanket and took pictures because they said someday I might want them. They gave us a memory box with her footprints and a lock of hair so fine it looked like spider silk. The photographer had stopped packing entirely and was staring at me with tears in his eyes. But according to Stephanie, I should be over all of that by now because people lose pregnancies all the time. I turned back to my sister, who was crying now, pink tears leaving tracks down her powder-covered cheeks. So you tell me, Steph. How long should it take me to get over Emma? 6 more months? A year? Should I just pretend she never existed so you can enjoy your pregnancy in peace? Maya, please stop, she whispered. Why? Because it's making your guests uncomfortable? Because it's ruining your perfect day? I gestured at the chaos around us, the scattered decorations, the confused family members, the abandoned photo props. Welcome to my world, Stephanie. Where perfect days don't exist anymore. The silence that followed felt different from the others, heavier, like the air before a tornado. I could see people processing what I just told them, the weight of Emma's reality settling over the backyard like a shroud. That's when David appeared at the back gate, still wearing his Saturday morning running clothes and looking confused. He must have gotten my frantic text from 20 minutes ago, back when I still thought I could handle this party with grace. Hey, sorry I'm late, he called out, jogging toward us with a smile that died the moment he saw my face. Maya? What's wrong? The sight of my husband, sweaty and concerned and completely unaware that I'd just blown up our family, made something crack inside my chest. David, who still whispered good morning to Emma's ultrasound photo on his nightstand. David, who'd held me through panic attacks in grocery store baby aisles and never once told me to get over it. She told them about Emma, I said quietly, and watched his expression shift from confusion to protective fury in real time. You what? David's voice went dangerously low as he looked between me and Stephanie. Maya, we agreed. I know what we agreed. The plan had been to keep Emma private, to protect her memory from exactly this kind of family drama. But Stephanie had pushed too far, and now our daughter's name was scattered among the pink confetti like everything else I destroyed today. David moved to my side, and I felt some of my reckless anger drain away as his hand found mine. His palm was warm and steady, grounding me when everything else felt like it was spinning out of control. Maybe someone should explain what's happening, he said carefully, looking at the crowd of uncomfortable relatives. Because Maya texted me 45 minutes ago saying she needed backup, and now I'm standing in what looks like a crime scene. She sabotaged the gender reveal, Stephanie said, her voice thick with tears and accusation. On purpose. She switched the confetti cannon timing to ruin my announcement. David's hand tightened around mine. Is that true? I looked up at him, at his familiar brown eyes and the scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at age 7. David, who'd painted Emma's nursery yellow because we wanted to be surprised. David, who'd researched cribs for weeks and assembled a changing table that still sat unused in our spare room. Yes, I said simply. He studied my face for a long moment. Why? Before I could answer, Stephanie laughed bitterly. Because she can't stand that I'm happy. Because she thinks being sad gives her the right to hurt other people. That's not, I started, but David held up his hand. Steph, with all due respect, shut up for a minute. His voice was calm but firm in the way that made people listen. Maya, tell me why. The entire party was watching us now like we were performers in some twisted dinner theater. I could see phones out, someone was definitely recording this, which meant it would probably end up on social media within hours. The thought should have horrified me, but I was too exhausted to care. Because 3 days ago she told me to get over losing Emma, I said. She said I was being dramatic and that people lose pregnancies all the time. She said at least now I know I can get pregnant, like Emma was just practice. David went very still. She said what? David, that's not exactly, Stephanie began, but he cut her off with a look. Did you say those things? Yes or no? Stephanie glanced around at the crowd, then back at David. I was trying to help her see the positive side of a terrible situation. That's a yes, David said flatly. I was frustrated, Stephanie continued, her voice getting higher. Maya's been depressed for months. She won't go to therapy, she won't take antidepressants, she just wallows. Someone needed to give her tough love. Tough love, David repeated, and I could hear the careful control in his voice starting to crack. About our daughter's death. It wasn't a daughter, Stephanie snapped, then immediately looked like she wanted to take the words back. I mean, it was tragic, obviously, but it wasn't like losing a real baby. She was only 16 weeks. Get out. David's voice was so quiet I almost missed it. But Stephanie heard, and so did everyone else. Excuse me? Get out of my sight before I say something I'll regret. David stepped forward, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely dangerous. Before I explain to your 50 guests exactly what kind of person tells a grieving mother that her baby wasn't real. The backyard erupted into chaos. She wasn't real to you maybe, but she was real to us, David continued, his voice carrying over the shocked murmurs of the crowd. We have her ultrasound photos. Her footprints. A death certificate with her name on it. But sure, Stephanie, tell me more about how 16 weeks doesn't count. Dad stepped between them, his face flushed. David, calm down. This is family. Family? David laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Family doesn't tell someone their dead child wasn't real. Family doesn't demand grieving parents plan parties celebrating what they'll never have. I never demanded anything, Stephanie protested, wiping pink powder from her cheek. I asked for help. Maya volunteered. I volunteered because you guilted me into it, I interrupted, finding my voice again. You said, and I quote, I guess I'll have to handle everything myself since you're too fragile to help your own sister. Remember that phone call, Steph? Tuesday night at 9:47 p.m.? Stephanie's face went white. You're twisting my words. Am I? Because I had the voicemail you left when I didn't pick up. Want me to play it for everyone? The threat hung in the air like a challenge. I could see Stephanie calculating, trying to remember exactly what she'd said. Her friend Melissa shifted uncomfortably, and I caught her whispering something to the woman next to her. Maya, Mom said carefully, maybe we should all take a breath and... No, Mom. I want to hear what Stephanie has to say about the voicemail. The one where she called me selfish for wallowing in ancient history and said I was using my miscarriage as an excuse to avoid family responsibilities. Ancient history? Aunt Patricia's voice cracked. Stephanie Marie, please tell me you didn't say that. Stephanie looked around desperately, like she was searching for an escape route. I was having a bad day. The party planning was overwhelming, and Jake was working late again, and I needed help. So you decided to stomp all over your sister's grief to get it? Sarah stepped forward, her expression disgusted. What is wrong with you? Nothing is wrong with me. Stephanie exploded. I'm 7 months pregnant and stressed and trying to celebrate my baby, but apparently that makes me the villain because Maya's baby died. The words hit the crowd like a physical slap. Someone gasped. David took another step forward, and I grabbed his arm before he could do something we'd all regret. There it is, I said quietly. The truth. You resent that Emma died because it makes your pregnancy less special. You can't stand that people might pay attention to my grief instead of your joy. That's not. It is, though. The voice came from an unexpected source, Stephanie's mother-in-law, Carol, who'd been quietly watching from the edge of the crowd. Stephanie, I've heard you complain multiple times about Maya stealing thunder from your announcements. I thought it was just pregnancy hormones making you emotional, but this. She shook her head sadly. Stephanie whirled toward her. Carol, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I lost 3 babies before I had Jake. 2 at 12 weeks, 1 at 19. And if someone had told me they weren't real, that I should just get over it. Carol's voice trembled with barely controlled anger. Maya, I owe you an apology. I should have reached out more after Emma. I should have done better. Thank you, I whispered, tears finally starting to fall. This is insane, Stephanie said wildly, looking around at the faces now staring at her with varying degrees of disappointment and disgust. You're all acting like I'm some kind of monster. I made one comment. Multiple comments, David corrected coldly. Over 6 months. Maya's been telling me about them. The suggestions that she should just try again. The eye rolls when she mentioned therapy. The time you asked her to stop talking about Emma because it was bringing down the mood at Mom's birthday dinner. A collective sharp intake of breath from the crowd. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. I remember that, Uncle Mike said slowly. I thought Maya just got quiet because she was tired. She got quiet because her sister told her that mentioning her dead daughter was inappropriate dinner conversation, David said. Stephanie's perfect party was now completely destroyed, and for the first time, I felt something that might have been regret. The regret lasted about 3 seconds, until Stephanie opened her mouth again. Fine, she screamed, her voice cracking. You want the truth? Yes, I'm sick of walking on eggshells around you. Yes, I'm tired of every conversation becoming about your dead baby. And yes, I think 6 months is long enough to grieve something that was barely even formed. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the neighbor's dog stopped barking. David's face went completely blank, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd started yelling. Something that was barely even formed, he repeated slowly. David, don't, I started, but he was already moving. No, Maya. Let her finish. He turned back to Stephanie, his voice deadly calm. Please, continue. Tell us more about how our daughter wasn't worth grieving. Stephanie seemed to realize she'd crossed a line even she couldn't uncross, but the damage was done. Around us, family members were shaking their heads in disgust. Her friend Jessica was openly crying. Even the photographer looked like he wanted to disappear. I didn't mean it like that, Stephanie backpedaled frantically. I just meant. You meant exactly what you said. Mom's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Stephanie Marie Richardson, I have never been more ashamed of you in my entire life. The use of Stephanie's full maiden name, something Mom only did when we were in serious trouble as kids, made everyone freeze. Mom stepped forward, and I could see her hands shaking with anger. Emma Rose was my granddaughter, Mom continued, her voice getting stronger. She was real. She mattered. And the fact that you could stand here, at your own party, and call her barely formed tells me everything I need to know about the person you become. Mom, please. No. I'm talking now. Mom's teacher voice came out in full force. I have watched Maya suffer for 6 months. Real, devastating grief that no parent should have to endure. And instead of supporting her sister, her only sister, you've made it about yourself. You've turned her trauma into an inconvenience for your timeline. Stephanie's face crumpled, but Mom wasn't finished. Do you know what Maya did the day after Emma's funeral? She went to Target and bought onesies for your baby shower. Size newborn through 6 months, because she wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. She was barely functioning, could barely get out of bed, but she still showed up for you. I felt my breath catch. I'd forgotten about those onesies, purchased in a haze of grief and guilt because I'd missed Stephanie's shower planning meeting due to a therapy appointment. And what did you do? Mom turned to face the crowd, like she was delivering a sermon. You complained that the onesies were the wrong brand. Said they'd shrink in the wash and asked if Maya still had the receipt. I didn't know about the timing, Stephanie whispered. Because you never asked. You never ask about anything except what Maya can do for you. Mom's voice rose. She's planned your engagement party, your bachelorette weekend, your baby shower, and now this disaster, all while processing the worst loss of her life. And your response is to tell her to get over it? Uncle Mike stepped forward cautiously. Linda, maybe we should. Mike, sit down. Mom's tone brooked no argument. I'm not finished. Stephanie, you want to know what else Maya did? She spent $300 on your registry gifts. $300 she didn't have because she's still paying medical bills from losing Emma. She put it on a credit card and told me not to tell you because she didn't want you to feel guilty. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Stephanie staggered backward, her hand flying to her throat. $300, Mom repeated. For the breast pump and the baby monitor and that ridiculous $40 receiving blanket you absolutely had to have. While she's getting collection notices from the hospital. Collection notices? Dad's voice was sharp. Maya, why didn't you tell us? I couldn't speak. Couldn't look at anyone. The financial stress had been my secret shame, the practical consequence of grief that no one ever talked about in sympathy cards. Because she's proud, Mom answered for me. Because she didn't want to burden anyone else with her problems. Unlike some people, Maya considers other people's feelings before she speaks. The pointed look at Stephanie was unmistakable. I didn't know, Stephanie kept repeating, like a broken record. I didn't know about any of this. Because you never bothered to find out, David said quietly. In 6 months, you've asked Maya how she's doing exactly once. I know because she tells me every conversation you two have. It's always about what you need, what you want, how pregnancy is affecting you. Stephanie looked around desperately for someone to defend her, but found only disappointed faces and uncomfortable silence. That's when her husband Jake finally spoke up from where he'd been standing frozen by the dessert table. Steph, he said quietly, we need to go home. No, Stephanie said sharply, whirling toward Jake. We're not going anywhere. This is our party, our house, our celebration. If anyone should leave, it's them. She pointed at David and me like we were trespassers instead of family. Jake's face flushed red. Stephanie, stop. Please, just stop. Stop what? Defending myself against your sister-in-law's tantrum? Stephanie's voice was getting shrill now, desperate. Everyone's acting like I committed murder when all I did was ask for help planning a party. Is that really all you think you did? Jake stepped closer to his wife, and I could see something shifting in his expression. Something that looked like recognition, or maybe disgust. Steph, I was there for half of those phone calls with Maya. I heard what you said. Stephanie went very still. Jake, don't. I heard you tell her that 16 weeks barely counts as a pregnancy when she tried to explain why organizing a baby party was difficult for her. Jake's voice was quiet but carried clearly across the silent backyard. I was sitting right next to you during that call 3 weeks ago, remember? When you rolled your eyes and mouthed, "Here we go again," while Maya was trying to tell you about her therapy appointment. You're remembering wrong, Stephanie said quickly, but her voice had lost its conviction. Am I? Because I also remember you laughing, actually laughing, when Maya sent that text about needing to skip the venue walkthrough because it was Emma's due date. You said, and I quote, "She's really milking this for all it's worth." The crowd made a collective sound of shock and revulsion. Even Stephanie's college friends were staring at her now with obvious horror. That due date was supposed to be today, I said quietly, the words scraping my throat raw. October 15th. Emma should have been born today. The timing hit everyone like a physical blow. Aunt Patricia started crying openly. Mom sat down heavily in the nearest chair, her face pale with understanding. Oh, Maya, she whispered. Oh, sweetheart, we didn't realize. That's why I couldn't do the venue walkthrough, I continued, feeling strangely detached from my own voice. That's why I've been barely functional for the past 2 weeks. Because while you were planning your gender reveal party, I was counting down to the day my daughter should have been born. Jake's face went completely white. Steph, you knew that. We talked about it. I said maybe we should postpone. For 1 day? Stephanie's voice cracked. We were supposed to rearrange our entire timeline, disappoint 53 people, and lose our deposits because Maya's having a hard day? Yes, Jake said simply. Yes, we absolutely should have postponed. The certainty in his voice seemed to shatter something in Stephanie. She looked around at the faces staring back at her, family members who'd known her since birth, friends who'd celebrated her engagement and marriage, in-laws who'd welcomed her into their family, and found no sympathy anywhere. This isn't fair, she said, her voice breaking. This was supposed to be our day. Our moment. We've been planning this for months. We've been planning this for 6 weeks, Jake corrected quietly. 6 weeks that you spent complaining about Maya's attitude and her inability to get over herself instead of considering that maybe, just maybe, asking a grieving mother to plan a baby celebration was cruel. Cruel? Stephanie turned to Jake with tears streaming down her pink-stained face. You think I'm cruel? Jake looked at his wife for a long moment, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Right now? Yes, I do. The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. Around us, guests shifted uncomfortably, some already edging toward the gate. This had gone far beyond family drama into something raw and devastating that no one wanted to witness. I want everyone to leave, Stephanie said suddenly, her voice hollow. Right now. Everyone out. Steph, her friend Melissa started. Out. Stephanie screamed. All of you. Get out of my house. Get out of my yard. This party is over. But nobody moved. Instead, they all looked at Jake, who was still staring at his wife like she'd transformed into a stranger. Yeah, he said finally, his voice heavy with exhaustion. I think it is. The guests began filing out in awkward clusters, whispering among themselves as they gathered purses and jackets. I watched Stephanie's carefully curated celebration dissolve into something that looked more like the aftermath of a natural disaster than a gender reveal party. Pink powder still coated half the decorations, and someone had accidentally stepped on the boy or girl banner during the chaos, leaving it torn and muddy. Maya. Jake approached us cautiously, his face drawn with exhaustion. Can I talk to you for a minute? David's hand tightened protectively around mine, but I nodded. Jake had always been kind to me, even when Stephanie wasn't. He'd sent flowers after Emma's funeral, not expensive ones, just a small arrangement of forget-me-nots with a handwritten note that said, "Thinking of you both." I need to tell you something, Jake said quietly, glancing back at Stephanie, who was furiously scraping pink powder off the dessert table while her remaining friends hovered nearby. Last Tuesday, after you called about the party planning, Steph hung up and said she was going to fix your attitude problem once and for all. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? She called your therapist's office. Jake's words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them in for days. Dr. Martinez? She told the receptionist she was concerned about your mental state and asked if there was a way to have you committed for evaluation. The world tilted sideways. She what? The receptionist obviously couldn't give her any information, but Steph was furious. She spent an hour researching involuntary psychiatric holds online. Jake rubbed his face with both hands. I thought she was just blowing off steam, but now. Maya, I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. David went very still beside me. She tried to have Maya institutionalized? She looked up the criteria for a 72-hour hold. Printed out pages about it. I found them in her nightstand yesterday when I was looking for the phone charger. Jake's voice was barely audible. One of the pages was highlighted where it talked about danger to self or others due to mental illness. Oh my God, I whispered, feeling sick. The thought of Stephanie researching ways to have me locked up while I was grieving Emma felt like a violation so profound I couldn't process it. That's when she started saying you were unstable and obsessing unhealthily, Jake continued miserably. She told my mom you were having episodes and might need professional intervention. I thought she meant like regular therapy, not that. Across the yard, Stephanie had stopped cleaning and was staring at us with growing alarm, clearly realizing Jake was sharing something she didn't want shared. Jake, she called sharply. What are you telling them? He turned to look at his wife, and I saw something die in his expression. The truth, Steph. Something you should have tried. You're making me sound crazy, Stephanie said, abandoning the table and walking toward us with quick, agitated steps. I was worried about Maya's mental health. Is that a crime? Worried enough to research having her committed? David's voice was dangerously quiet. Without telling her husband, her parents, or her actual doctor. Stephanie's face flushed deeper than the pink powder. I was exploring options. Maya's been depressed for months, and nobody was doing anything about it. She's in therapy twice a week, I said, my voice shaking. She's on medication. She's doing grief counseling with Dr. Martinez every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. What exactly did you think needed to be done? Real intervention, Stephanie shot back. Professional help. You're clearly not getting better with whatever you're doing now. Getting better according to who? David stepped forward, and I could see he was fighting to keep control. According to your timeline for her grief? According to your comfort level with her pain? Mom, who had been quietly listening from her chair, suddenly stood up. Stephanie, please tell me you didn't actually try to have Maya committed to a psychiatric facility. The silence stretched long enough to be an answer. Around us, the few remaining guests were openly staring now, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust. I made some phone calls, Stephanie admitted defensively. I consulted professionals about Maya's behavior patterns. Whose professionals? Dad's voice was sharp. Dr. Brennan's office. Jake's uncle Kevin, he's a psychiatrist in Denver, remember? I sent him some of Maya's texts and asked for his professional opinion about her stability. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. You shared my private text messages with a stranger? Kevin's not a stranger, he's family. He's Jake's family. I exploded. I've met him exactly twice. You sent my private grief texts to someone I barely know and asked him to diagnose me? Stephanie's chin lifted defiantly. Those texts were concerning Maya. You wrote things like I don't know how to keep living without her and every day feels impossible. That's not normal grief, that's depression with suicidal ideation. That's completely normal grief. Mom stood up so fast her chair tipped over. Stephanie, how dare you share Maya's private messages? How dare you try to weaponize her pain? I wasn't weaponizing anything. I was trying to help. By having her locked up? Jake's voice cracked. Steph, do you hear yourself right now? By having her locked up? Jake's voice cracked. Steph, do you hear yourself right now? I was trying to get her help. Stephanie's voice pitched higher, more desperate. Maya, show them the text you sent me last week. The ones about how nothing feels real anymore and I can't remember who I was before this happened. Tell me that's healthy behavior. The fact that she'd saved and cataloged my most vulnerable moments felt like another violation. Those texts had been sent at 3 a.m. during my worst nights, when grief felt like drowning and I'd reached out to my sister for support. Those were sent to you in confidence, I said, my voice shaking. When I was having panic attacks and needed someone to talk to. You responded with heart emojis and hang in their messages, then apparently screenshotted them to build a case against me. I kept them because I was worried about you, Stephanie insisted, but Jake was shaking his head. No, you kept them because you were building evidence, he said quietly. The same way you started recording Maya's phone calls last month. A collective gasp went up from the remaining crowd. Even I stared at Jake in shock. You recorded our calls? My voice came out barely above a whisper. Stephanie's face went white. Jake, shut up. Right now. I can't do this anymore, Steph. Jake pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly. Maya, she has audio files on her laptop labeled Maya episodes 1 through 7. Conversations where you called crying, or having panic attacks, or just needing someone to listen. Why? The word came out strangled. Stephanie, why would you record me? For your own protection, she said quickly, but her eyes were darting around like a trapped animal. So if something happened to you, there would be evidence of your mental state. Evidence for what? David's voice was deadly calm. Stephanie opened and closed her mouth several times before answering. For David. So he'd know it wasn't his fault if something happened. The implication hung in the air like poison. Around us, I could hear people whispering, some of them already pulling out their phones. This was going to be all over Facebook within the hour. You were building a case for David to use after I killed myself, I said flatly, the words tasting like ash. That's what this was about. I never said that. You didn't have to say it. I looked at my sister, this person I'd shared a bedroom with for 16 years, who'd been my maid of honor and my emergency contact and my best friend until 6 months ago. You decided I was going to die anyway, so you might as well get some use out of my breakdown. That's not what I was doing, Stephanie said desperately, tears streaming down her face now. Maya, you have to believe me. I was scared for you. You've been so different, so fragile. Fragile enough to sabotage your party? I laughed bitterly. Which is it, Steph? Am I too broken to function, or dangerous enough to ruin your perfect day on purpose? Because it can't be both. Stephanie looked around wildly for support and found none. Even her closest friends were backing away now, their expressions horrified. Dr. Brennan told me that untreated grief can turn into major depressive disorder with psychotic features, she said desperately. He said sometimes family members need to take action when patients can't advocate for themselves. Dr. Brennan told you that based on text messages you showed him without my consent? Mom's voice was ice cold. Stephanie, that's not just unethical, it might be illegal. It's definitely illegal, said a voice from the back of the crowd. Everyone turned to see David's sister Rachel, who I'd forgotten was even there. I'm a social worker, and what you're describing is a massive HIPAA violation. Maya, you could file charges. The word charges seemed to snap something in Stephanie. Charges? You want to press charges against me for caring about your welfare? For trying to keep you alive? For violating my privacy, I said quietly. For recording me without consent. For sharing my medical information with people who aren't my doctors. For trying to have me committed based on cherry-picked text messages and illegal recordings. Stephanie staggered backward like I'd hit her. You're my sister. Then act like it. The words hung between us like a blade, cutting through 6 months of accumulated pain and resentment. Stephanie's face crumpled completely, but I felt nothing except a hollow exhaustion that seemed to echo in my bones. Maya, Jake said quietly, his voice careful and measured, there's something else you need to know. David's grip on my hand tightened. What now? Jake glanced at Stephanie, who was shaking her head frantically, then back at me. The party planning. The reason Steph insisted you help organize everything, handle all the vendor calls, manage the guest list, it wasn't just because she needed help. Jake, don't. Stephanie's voice was barely a whisper. She wanted documentation of your erratic behavior during stressful situations, Jake continued, ignoring his wife's pleading look. Every time you had to reschedule a vendor meeting because of therapy, every time you cried during a planning call, every time you needed a break, she wrote it down in a notebook she labeled Maya's episodes. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't just sisterly insensitivity or pregnancy hormones making Stephanie cruel. This was systematic, deliberate documentation designed to build a case against me. Show them the notebook, I said flatly. Maya, please, Stephanie started. Show them the notebook, or I'll have Jake get it himself. My voice was steady now, calm in a way that seemed to scare Stephanie more than my earlier anger had. With shaking hands, Stephanie pulled a small leather journal from her purse. The same purse she'd carried to our vendor meetings, the same purse that had been sitting on the table during our phone calls where I'd broken down sobbing about missing Emma. Jake took the notebook and flipped it open. October 3rd, Maya canceled florist appointment, claimed therapy emergency. Crying became hysterical when I mentioned rescheduling fees. October 8th, Maya hung up during catering call when they asked about baby-themed cupcake toppers. Called back 20 minutes later apologizing, voice shaky and unstable. Each entry felt like a slap. Keep reading. October 12th, Maya agreed to help with party favors but showed up 2 hours late with red, swollen eyes. Claimed she'd been having a hard morning but couldn't articulate why. Kept staring at the baby booties we were putting in gift bags. Had to take multiple breaks to get air outside. I remembered that day. October 12th had been Emma's original due date before my doctor moved it to the 15th during my 12-week ultrasound. I'd spent the morning sitting in her nursery, holding the teddy bear we'd bought her, trying to convince myself I was strong enough to handle tiny pink booties without falling apart. She was documenting my grief, I said quietly, looking around at the faces staring back at me. Every normal response to losing a child, she wrote down as evidence of instability. Mom had gone completely pale. Stephanie, this is monstrous. It's not monstrous, Stephanie said desperately. Maya, you don't see yourself clearly right now. The way you zone out during conversations, the way you can't handle normal situations without breaking down. Normal situations like planning a gender reveal party on my dead daughter's due date? My voice cut through her explanation like a scalpel. Tell me, Steph, what would be the stable response to that request? You could have just said no, she whispered. I did say no. 3 times. Do you want Jake to read the entries where you documented my resistance to family obligations and inability to prioritize appropriately? Jake's face had gone gray as he continued reading the notebook. Jesus, Steph. You recorded the exact time she cried, how long her episodes lasted, what triggered them. This reads like a clinical observation report. Because that's exactly what it is, I said, feeling a strange clarity settle over me. She turned my grief into a research project. I was trying to help you, Stephanie repeated, but the words sounded hollow now, even to her. No, you were trying to control me, I said. You were building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent so I'd stop interfering with your perfect pregnancy experience. Around us, the last of the guests were gathering their things and heading for the gate, many of them pulling out phones to undoubtedly share what they'd witnessed. Stephanie's carefully curated celebration had become the kind of family drama that would be whispered about at holiday gatherings for years to come. I think, David said quietly, it's time for us to go. But as we turned to leave, Stephanie called out one last time. Maya, wait. Please. I'm pregnant. I'm 7 months pregnant, and my hormones are making me crazy, and I need my sister right now. I need you to forgive me. I stopped walking and turned back to look at her one more time. Pink powder still clung to her hair, her makeup was streaked with tears, and her beautiful maternity dress was stained and wrinkled. She looked exactly like what she was, someone who had destroyed something precious and was only now realizing the full scope of what she'd lost. Stephanie, I said softly, I was 7 months pregnant with Emma when I started bleeding. 7 months pregnant when I had to deliver her too early and watch her die. And not once, did I use my hormones as an excuse to hurt people I love. I paused, letting the words settle. Being pregnant doesn't give you permission to be cruel. It just makes the cruelty harder to watch. The silence that followed my words felt final, like the closing of a door that would never open again. Stephanie's face crumpled completely, but I found I had no comfort left to offer her. 6 months of accumulated pain had crystallized into something hard and unforgiving in my chest. Maya, please, she whispered one more time, but I was already walking toward the gate. That's when Jake's phone rang, cutting through the tense quiet. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. It's Dr. Brennan's office, he said, looking between Stephanie and me. The psychiatrist staff consulted about Maya. Don't answer it, Stephanie said quickly, but Jake was already swiping to accept the call. Hello? His voice was cautious. We all stood frozen, listening to his side of the conversation. Yes, this is Jake Richardson. What? No, I never gave permission for. She said what? I watched Jake's expression shift from confusion to horror to fury in the span of 30 seconds. Ma'am, I need you to repeat that please. She told you she was Maya's medical proxy? No, absolutely not. She has no legal authority. Yes, I understand the seriousness. He hung up and stared at Stephanie with an expression I'd never seen before. Dr. Brennan's office just received a formal request for Maya's psychiatric evaluation, signed with my name and dated yesterday. They wanted to schedule an emergency intervention for Monday morning. The backyard went dead silent. Even the wind chime stopped jingling. What exactly does that mean? David's voice was carefully controlled. It means someone forged my signature on paperwork requesting that Maya be brought in for a 72-hour psychiatric hold, Jake said slowly. The receptionist called because the credit card authorization got declined. They needed a different payment method for the $2,800 evaluation fee. $2,800. For an involuntary psychiatric evaluation that I knew nothing about, scheduled for the Monday after Emma's due date weekend when I'd be at my most vulnerable. Stephanie, Mom's voice was deadly quiet. Tell me you didn't forge Jake's signature on medical documents. But Stephanie's face had gone completely white, and her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright. I panicked, she whispered. After our fight on Tuesday, when you hung up on me, I thought maybe if professionals evaluated you, they could help in ways I couldn't. I thought if Jake requested it as family, they'd take it more seriously. You forged my signature, Jake repeated, like he couldn't quite process what he was hearing. On psychiatric hold paperwork. Using our credit card. I was going to tell you, Stephanie said desperately. I was going to explain everything after the party, after we celebrated the baby. I thought maybe if Maya got professional help, she'd be able to be happy for us again. Happy for us, I repeated numbly. You were planning to have me institutionalized so I'd be happy about your pregnancy. The twisted logic was so breathtaking that several people actually laughed, harsh, disbelieving sounds that seemed to echo in the pink-dusted backyard. The appointment is Monday at 9 a.m., Jake continued, his voice hollow. Stephanie told them Maya had been making threats, showing signs of dangerous instability, and needed immediate intervention. She provided them with edited audio clips from the phone recordings as evidence. David pulled out his phone. I'm calling our lawyer. David, don't, Stephanie pleaded. Please, this has gone too far already. Can't we just cancel the appointment and move on? Move on? I stared at my sister, this person who had systematically documented my grief, recorded my breakdown calls, and forged documents to have me committed. Stephanie, you tried to have me locked up in a psychiatric facility based on lies and illegally obtained recordings. I was trying to save your life, she said, tears streaming down her face. Maya, you've been talking about wanting to be with Emma, about how hard it is to keep going. What was I supposed to do with that? Support me, I said simply. Listen to me. Maybe suggest I talk to my actual therapist about adjusting my medication or increasing my session frequency. You know, like a normal person would do. But instead, David added grimly, you decided to play psychiatrist yourself and have Maya committed against her will on forged documents. The few remaining guests were backing toward the exit now, clearly wanting to escape before this got any worse. But Uncle Mike stepped forward, his expression grim. Stephanie, he said quietly, forgery is a felony in Colorado. What you did isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal fraud. Stephanie looked around desperately for someone to defend her, but found only disappointed faces and uncomfortable silence. Even her closest friends were gone now, having fled during the worst of the revelations. Jake, she turned to her husband with desperate eyes. Tell them I was just scared. Tell them I didn't mean any harm. But Jake was staring at his wife like she was a stranger. Steph, you used my name to try to have someone committed to a psychiatric facility. Without their knowledge. Based on recordings you made illegally. How exactly did you think this was going to end? Jake was staring at the phone in his hand like it might explode. There's another problem, he said quietly. Dr. Brennan's office said they've already filed preliminary paperwork with the county. Once a psychiatric hold request is submitted with supporting evidence, it triggers an automatic wellness check protocol. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means police and a mental health crisis team are required to perform a welfare check within 72 hours of the filing. Jake's voice was hollow. They're coming to your house, Maya. Probably tomorrow. David went completely still beside me. They're sending cops to evaluate Maya's mental state based on forged documents? It's standard protocol, Rachel said grimly, her social worker training kicking in. Once the paperwork is in the system, they have to follow through. Even if we try to withdraw the request now, they'll still want to verify that Maya isn't in immediate danger. But I'm not in danger, I said desperately. I'm in therapy, I'm on medication, I'm functioning. According to the documentation Stephanie provided, you've been making statements about wanting to join Emma and not knowing how to keep living, Jake read from his phone, apparently pulling up emails from the doctor's office. She included transcript excerpts from your recorded calls where you said things like I don't see the point of anything anymore and every day feels impossible to get through. Those words, taken from my darkest 3 a.m. phone calls to my sister when grief felt like drowning, sounded completely different without context. Stripped of the nuance, the back and forth conversation, the reassurance I'd given that I wasn't actually planning to hurt myself, they read like a suicide note. She edited the recordings, I said, understanding flooding through me like ice water. She took pieces of different conversations and put them together to make it sound worse than it was. That's not editing, that's fabrication, Mom said sharply. Stephanie, please tell me you didn't manufacture evidence. Stephanie's silence was answer enough. Around us, the remaining family members were exchanging horrified looks. This had moved far beyond family drama into something that could destroy lives. The crisis team evaluation isn't just a conversation, Rachel continued, her professional mask slipping to show genuine concern. If they determine Maya presents a risk based on Stephanie's evidence, they can initiate an immediate hold. She could be taken directly from her home to a psychiatric facility for up to 72 hours. On what grounds? David's voice was sharp with barely controlled panic. On the grounds that a family member provided documented evidence of suicidal ideation and declining mental health, Rachel said grimly. The audio clips alone might be enough, especially if they're presented without context. I felt the world tilting sideways. So because Stephanie recorded me crying and edited the calls to sound worse, I could be locked up in a psychiatric ward against my will? The system is designed to err on the side of caution, Rachel explained. They'd rather hospitalize someone unnecessarily than risk a suicide. With evidence like audio recordings and a family member's sworn testimony about declining behavior. She didn't need to finish the sentence. We all understood. There's more, Jake said, his face getting paler as he read through his phone. Stephanie told them Maya has been increasingly erratic and unpredictable, citing today's party incident as proof of dangerous acting out behavior. She planned this, David said suddenly, his voice filled with dawning horror. Stephanie, you planned for Maya to have a breakdown at your party. You pushed and pushed until she snapped, then used her reaction as evidence that she's unstable. Stephanie's face crumpled, but she didn't deny it. You set me up, I whispered, staring at my sister with growing understanding. The party date, the planning demands, the cruel comments, you were trying to trigger a public breakdown you could use as proof I'm mentally incompetent. I thought, Stephanie said through tears, if everyone could see how much you're struggling, they'd understand why you need help. What you did, Uncle Mike said quietly, is entrapment. And possibly criminal conspiracy. The pink confetti scattered around the yard suddenly looked less like party debris and more like evidence of something much darker than I'd realized. Maya, Jake's voice was barely audible as he continued reading from his phone. There's one more thing. Dr. Brennan's office said Stephanie scheduled a follow-up appointment for next Friday. For both of you. I stared at him blankly. Both of us? A couples intervention session. She told them you and David were having marital problems related to your psychological decline and that David was considering separation due to your inability to move forward. David's face went completely white. She said what? According to this email, Stephanie informed Dr. Brennan that David has been increasingly concerned about Maya's attachment to her deceased fetus and wanted professional guidance about when grief becomes pathological obsession. Jake's voice cracked as he read. She provided them with screenshots of your social media posts, Maya. Pictures of Emma's nursery, the memorial garden you planted, the ultrasound photos you shared on what would have been her 6-month birthday. Each revelation felt like another punch to the gut. Those posts had been my way of keeping Emma's memory alive, of marking the milestones she'd never reach. I'd shared them because my grief counselor said honoring her life publicly could be healing. She turned my healing process into evidence of mental illness, I said numbly. It gets worse, Jake continued, and I wondered how that was even possible. She told Dr. Brennan that David asked her to intervene because he was afraid to confront you directly about your deteriorating condition. David made a sound like he'd been physically struck. I never said any of that. I've never spoken to Stephanie about Maya's therapy or our marriage. Ever. I know that, and you know that, but Dr. Brennan doesn't, Jake said miserably. Stephanie created an entire narrative where she's the concerned sister trying to save her unstable sibling and her struggling marriage. She even forged your signature on a spousal consent form, David. My signature? David's voice was dangerously quiet. On what kind of form? Authorization for Dr. Brennan to discuss Maya's case with Stephanie as your designated representative, Jake read. Dated last Monday, notarized by someone named Patricia Williams. Aunt Patricia made a strangled sound. Stephanie Marie, please tell me you didn't use my notary license for this. The silence that followed was deafening. Aunt Patricia worked as a loan officer at First National Bank, and her notary commission was essential for her job. If Stephanie had forged notarizations, Patricia could lose her license and her career. You used my stamp? Aunt Patricia's voice was shaking. When I was babysitting Connor last weekend, you used my notary stamp to forge legal documents? I only borrowed it for a few minutes, Stephanie whispered. While you were giving Connor his bath. I thought if the documents looked official, Dr. Brennan would take the situation more seriously. You stole my professional seal to commit notary fraud, Aunt Patricia said slowly, like she was testing how the words sounded. Stephanie, that's a federal crime. I could go to prison. I could lose everything. The scope of Stephanie's deception was becoming clearer, and it was far worse than any of us had imagined. This wasn't just about recording phone calls or sharing text messages. She'd committed multiple felonies, dragged innocent family members into her schemes, and created a web of lies so complex it could destroy several lives. How many signatures did you forge? David asked, his voice deadly calm. Jake scrolled through his phone with shaking hands. According to these emails, yours, mine, Maya's medical proxy designation, and something called a concerned family member affidavit signed by your parents. Mom and Dad both went rigid. We never signed anything, Dad said sharply. Stephanie told Dr. Brennan that Maya's parents were so concerned about her mental state they were considering filing for guardianship, Jake continued reading. She attached a document requesting information about adult protective services and involuntary commitment procedures, signed Robert and Linda Morrison and dated Wednesday. Wednesday, Mom repeated slowly. The day Stephanie came over to borrow my lasagna pan. She was alone in my kitchen for 20 minutes while I was folding laundry. The systematic nature of Stephanie's planning was breathtaking in its scope and terrifying in its implications. She'd spent weeks building a false case against me, forging documents, stealing professional seals, and manipulating multiple medical and legal systems. And tomorrow morning, police officers and crisis counselors were going to show up at my door with a file full of fabricated evidence and forged authorizations, ready to take me away based on my sister's lies. We need to call everyone, David said urgently. Our lawyer, Dr. Martinez, the police. We need to get ahead of this before. His phone started ringing, cutting him off mid-sentence. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but Jake's face went gray when he saw it. That's Dr. Brennan's office, he said. They're calling back. David answered the call on speaker, his jaw set in determination. This is David Chen, Maya's husband. I understand there's been some kind of misunderstanding about psychiatric evaluation paperwork. Mr. Chen, this is Dr. Brennan's office, came the crisp voice of a receptionist. We're calling because we've discovered some irregularities in the documentation submitted for your wife's emergency evaluation. My heart hammered as Jake stepped closer to the phone. Around us, the remaining family members held their breath. What kind of irregularities? David asked. Well, sir, when we ran the credit card authorization for the evaluation fee, the bank flagged multiple recent charges to psychiatric services under different names. It appears someone has been scheduling evaluations for several individuals using forged payment information. Jake's face went white. Several individuals? Yes, we have requests filed for Maya Chen, and also for. There was a pause, papers rustling, Jessica Morrison, Patricia Williams, and Linda Morrison. All with similar documentation patterns and audio evidence, all requested by the same family member claiming medical proxy status. The backyard erupted. Aunt Patricia grabbed the phone. This is Patricia Williams. I never requested any psychiatric evaluation. And I'm Linda Morrison, Mom said urgently. Ma'am, we need to know exactly what paperwork was submitted in our names. Stephanie had gone completely silent, standing frozen like a deer in headlights as her web of lies unraveled in real time. According to our files, the receptionist continued, Ms. Stephanie Richardson submitted concerns about multiple family members showing signs of collective psychological instability following what she described as a family traumatic event. She indicated that several relatives were enabling each other's unhealthy grief responses and needed coordinated intervention. She tried to have all of us committed, I whispered, staring at Stephanie in horror. Not just me. Everyone who supported me. The audio evidence provided includes recordings of Mrs. Linda Morrison encouraging her daughter's obsessive behaviors and Mrs. Patricia Williams validating unhealthy attachment to deceased family members, the receptionist read. Ms. Richardson indicated she was the only family member with clear judgment about the situation. Aunt Patricia made a sound like a wounded animal. She recorded me talking about Emma at the memorial service. When I said we should plant a tree in her memory, when I told Maya her grief was normal and healthy. She recorded all of us, Mom said, her voice shaking with rage. Every conversation where we supported Maya, where we said her grief was valid, where we criticized Stephanie's behavior. She turned our love into evidence of mental illness. David's voice was deadly quiet when he spoke to the phone. Ma'am, we need to file a formal complaint and withdraw all of these requests immediately. The person who submitted them had no legal authority to do so, and we have reason to believe multiple crimes have been committed. Sir, I need to inform you that we've already contacted the authorities about this situation. When the bank flagged the fraudulent charges, they were required to report it as suspected medical identity theft. Officers are en route to Ms. Richardson's location now. As if on cue, the sound of sirens became audible in the distance, growing louder by the second. Stephanie began backing toward the house, her face pale with panic. Jake, we need to go. We need to leave right now. But Jake was staring at his wife like she was a stranger. No, Steph. We're not running from this. You're going to face what you've done. The sirens were getting closer. Through the gate, I could see neighbors starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by the chaos and the approaching police cars. Maya, Stephanie said desperately, please. I'm pregnant. Think about the baby. Your nephew or niece. Don't let them arrest me. I looked at my sister one last time, this person who had systematically tried to destroy my life, my marriage, my support system, and my freedom. Who had turned my worst grief into a weapon against everyone who loved me. Stephanie, I said quietly, you should have thought about your baby before you committed multiple felonies. The police cars pulled up just as the last of the pink confetti blew away in the evening breeze.